The Mahabharata of Krishna-Dwaipayana Vyasa. Translated into English prose from the original Sanskrit text by Pratap Chandra Roy C.I.E. This free ebook has been downloaded from holybooks.com. Vana Parva. Section 287, Draupadi Harana Parva continued. Markandeya said, beholding both the brothers Rama and Lakshmana prostrate on the ground, the son of Ravana tied them in a network of those arrows of his which he had obtained as boons, and tied by Indrajit on the field of battle by means of that arrowy net, those heroic tigers among men resembled a couple of hawks immured in a cage. And beholding those heroes prostrate on the ground pierced with hundreds of arrows, Sugriva with all the monkeys stood surrounding them on all sides. And the king of the monkeys stood there, accompanied by Sushena and Menda and Dvivida, and Kumuda and Angada and Hanuman and Nila and Tara and Nala. And Vibhishana, having achieved success in another part of the field, soon arrived at that spot, and roused those heroes from insensibility, awakening them by means of the weapon called Prajna. Then Sugriva soon extracted the arrows from their bodies, and by means of that most efficacious medicine called the Visalya, applied with celestial mantras, those human heroes regained their consciousness. And the arrows having been extracted from their bodies, those mighty warriors in a moment rose from their recumbent posture, their pains and fatigue thoroughly alleviated. And beholding Rama the descendant of Ikshvaku's race, quite at his ease, Vibhishana, O son of Pritha, joining his hands, told him these words, O chastiser of foes, at the command of the king of the Guhayakas, a Guhayaka hath come from the White Mountains, bringing with him his water. O great king, this water is a present to thee from Kuvara, so that all creatures that are invisible may, O chastiser of foes, become visible to thee. This water laved over the eyes will make every invisible creature visible to thee, as also to any other person to whom thou mayst give it. Saying so be it, Rama took that sacred water, and sanctified his own eyes therewith. And the high-minded Lakshmana also did the same. And Sugriva and Jambuvan, and Hanuman and Angada, and Menda and Dvivida, and Nila and many other foremost of the monkeys, laved their eyes with that water. And thereupon it exactly happened as Vibhishana had said, for, O Yudhishthira, soon did the eyes of all these became capable of beholding things that could not be seen by the unassisted eye. Meanwhile, Indrajit, after the success he had won, went to his father. And having informed him of the feats he had achieved, he speedily returned to the field of battle and placed himself at the van of his army. The son of Sumitra then, under Vibhishana's guidance, rushed towards that wrathful son of Ravana coming back, from desire of battle, to lead the attack. And Lakshmana, excited to fury and receiving a hint from Vibhishana, and desiring to slay Indrajit who had not completed his daily sacrifice, smote with his arrows that warrior burning to achieve success. And desirous of vanquishing each other, the encounter that took place between them was exceedingly wonderful, like that in days of yore between the Lord of Celestials and Prahrada. And Indrajit pierced the son of Sumitra with arrows penetrating into his very vitals. And the son of Sumitra also pierced Ravana's son with arrows of fiery energy. And pierced with Lakshmana's arrows, the son of Ravana became senseless with wrath. And he shot at Lakshmana 8 shafts fierce as venomous snakes. Listen now, O Yudhishthira, as I tell thee how the heroic son of Sumitra then took his adversary's life by means of 3 winged arrows possessed of the energy and effulgence of fire. With one of these, he severed from Indrajit's body that arm of his enemy which had grasped the bow. With the second he caused that other arm which had held the arrows, to drop down on the ground. With the third that was bright and possessed of the keenest edge, he cut off his head decked with a beautiful nose and bright with earrings. And shorn of arms and head, the trunk became fearful to behold. And having slain the foe thus, that foremost of mighty men then slew with his arrows the charioteer of his adversary. And the horses then dragged away the empty chariot into the city. And Ravana then beheld that car without his son on it. And hearing that his son had been slain, Ravana suffered his heart to be overpowered with grief. And under the influence of extreme grief and affliction, the king of the Rakshasas suddenly cherished the desire of killing the princess of Mithila. And seizing a sword, the wicked Rakshasa hastily ran towards that lady staying within the Asoka wood longing to behold her lord. Then Avindhya, beholding that sinful purpose of the wicked wretch, appeased his fury. Listen, O Yudhishthira, to the reasons urged by Avindhya. That wise Rakshasa said, placed as thou art on the blazing throne of an empire, it behoveth thee not to slay a woman. Besides, this woman is already slain, considering that she is a captive in thy power. I think she would not be slain if only her body were destroyed. Slay thou her husband. He being slain, she will be slain too. Indeed, not even he of 100 sacrifices, Indra, is thy equal in prowess. The gods with Indra at their head, had repeatedly been affrighted by thee in battle. With these and many other words of the same import, Avindhya succeeded in appeasing Ravana. And the latter did indeed listen to his counselor's speech. And that wanderer of the night, then resolved to give battle himself, sheathed his sword, and issued orders for preparing his chariot. Thus ends the 287th section in the Draupadi Harana Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 288, Draupadi Harana Parva continued. Markandeya said, the ten-necked Ravana, excited to fury at the death of his beloved son, ascended his car decked with gold and gems. And surrounded by terrible Rakshasas with various kinds of weapons in their hands, Ravana rushed towards Rama, fighting with numerous monkey chiefs. And beholding him rushing in wrath towards the monkey army, Menda and Nila and Nala and Angada, and Hanuman and Jambuman, surrounded him with all their troops. And those foremost of monkeys and bears began to exterminate with trunks of trees, the soldiers of the ten-necked, Ravana, in his every sight. And beholding the enemy slaughtering his troops, the Rakshasa king, Ravana, possessed of great powers of illusion, began to put them forth. And forth from his body began to spring hundreds and thousands of Rakshasas armed with arrows and lances and double-edged swords in hand. Rama, however, with a celestial weapon slew all those Rakshasas. The king of the Rakshasas then once more put forth his prowess of illusion. The ten-faced, producing from his body numerous warriors resembling, O Bharata, both Rama and Lakshmana, rushed towards the two brothers. And then those Rakshasas, hostile to Rama and Lakshmana and armed with bows and arrows, rushed towards Rama, and beholding that power of illusion put forth by the king of Rakshasas, that descendant of Ikshvaku's race, the son of Sumitra, addressed Rama in these heroic words, slay those Rakshasas, those wretches with forms like thy own. And Rama, thereupon slew those and other Rakshasas of forms resembling his own. And that time Matali, the charioteer of Indra, approached Rama on the field of battle, with a car effulgent as the sun and unto which were yoked horses of a tawny hue. And Matali said, O son of Kakutsta's race, this excellent and victorious car unto which have been yoked this pair of tawny horses, belonging to the Lord of Celestials. It is on this excellent car, O tiger among men, that Indra hath slain in battle hundreds of Daityas and Danavas. Therefore, O tiger among men, do thou, riding on the car driven by me, quickly slay Ravana in battle. Do not delay in achieving this. Thus addressed by him, the descendant of Raghu's race however doubted the truthful words of Matali, thinking this is another illusion produced by the Rakshasas. Vibhishana then addressed him saying, this, O tiger among men, is no illusion of the wicked Ravana. Ascend thou this chariot quickly, for this, O thou of great effulgence, belongeth to Indra. The descendant of Kakutstha then cheerfully said unto Vibhishana, So be it, and riding on that car, rushed wrathfully upon Ravana. And when Ravana, too, rushed against his antagonist, a loud wail of woe was set up by the creatures of the earth, while the celestials in heaven sent forth a leonine roar accompanied by beating of large drums. The encounter then that took place between the ten-necked Rakshasa and that prince of Raghu's race, was fierce in the extreme. Indeed, that combat between them hath no parallel elsewhere. And Rakshasa hurled at Rama a terrible javelin looking like Indra's thunderbolt and resembling a Brahmana's curse on the point of utterance. Rama, however, quickly cut into fragments that javelin by means of his sharp arrows. And beholding that most difficult feat, Ravana was struck with fear. But soon his wrath was excited and the ten-necked hero began to shower on Rama whetted arrows by thousands and tens of thousands, and countless weapons of various kinds, such as rockets and javelins and maces and battle axes and darts of various kinds and shatagnis and whetted shafts. And beholding that terrible form of illusion displayed by the ten-necked Rakshasa, the monkeys fled in fear in all directions. Then the descendant of Kakutstha, taking out of his quiver an excellent arrow furnished with handsome wings and golden feathers and a bright and beautiful head, fixed it on the bow with Brahmastra mantra. And beholding that excellent arrow transformed by Rama, with proper mantras into a Brahma weapon, the celestials and the Gandharvas with Indra at their head, began to rejoice. And the gods and the Danavas and the Kinnaras were led by the display of that Brahma weapon to regard the life of their Rakshasa foe almost closed. Then Rama shot that terrible weapon of unrivaled energy, destined to compass Ravana's death, and resembling the curse of a Brahmana on the point of utterance. And as soon, O Bharata, as that arrow was shot by Rama from his bow drawn to a circle, the Rakshasa king with his chariot and charioteer and horses blazed up, surrounded on all sides by a terrific fire. And beholding Ravana slain by Rama of famous achievements, the celestials with the Gandharvas and the Charanas, rejoiced exceedingly. And deprived of universal dominion by the energy of the Brahma weapon, the five elements forsook the illustrious Ravana, and were consumed by the Brahma weapon, the physical ingredients of Ravana's body. His flesh and blood were all reduced to nothingness, so that the ashes even could not be seen. Thus ends the 288th section in the Draupadi Harana Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 289, Draupadi Harana Parva continued. Markandeya said, having slain Ravana, that wretched king of the Rakshasas and foe of the celestials, Rama with his friends and Sumitra's son rejoiced exceedingly. And after the ten-necked Rakshasa hath been slain, the celestials with the rishis at their head, worshipped Rama of mighty arms, blessing and uttering the word Jaya repeatedly. And all the celestials and the Gandharvas and the denizens of the celestial regions gratified Rama of eyes like lotus leaves, with hymns and flowery showers. And having duly worshipped Rama, they all went away to those regions whence they had come. And, O thou of unfading glory, the firmament at that time looked as if a great festival was being celebrated. And having slain the ten-necked Rakshasa, the Lord Rama of worldwide fame, that conqueror of hostile cities, bestowed Lanka on Vibhishana. Then that old and wise counselor of Ravana known by the name of Avindhya, with Sita walking before him but behind Vibhishana, who was at the front, came out of the city. And with great humility Avindhya said unto the illustrious descendant of Kakutstha, O illustrious one, accept thou this goddess, Janaka's daughter of excellent conduct. Hearing these words, the descendant of Ikshvaku's race alighted from his excellent chariot and beheld Sita bathed in tears. And beholding that beautiful lady seated within her vehicle, afflicted with grief, besmeared with filth, with matted locks on head, and attired in dirty robes, Rama, afraid of the loss of his honor, said unto her, Daughter of Vaidha, go whithersoever thou likest. Thou art now free. What should have been done by me hath been done. O blessed lady, owning me for thy husband, it is not meet that thou shouldst grow old in the abode of the Rakshasa. It is for this I have slain that wanderer of the night. But how can one like us, acquainted with every truth of morality, embrace even for a moment a woman that had fallen into others' hands? O Princess of Mithila, whether thou art chaste or unchaste, I dare not enjoy thee, now that thou art like sacrificial butter lapped by a dog. Hearing these cruel words, that adorable girl suddenly fell down in great affliction of heart, like a plantain tree severed from its roots. And the color that was suffusing her face in consequence of the joy she had felt, quickly disappeared, like watery particles on a mirror blown thereon by the breath of the mouth. And hearing these words of Rama, all the monkeys also with Lakshmana became still as dead. Then the divine and pure-souled Brahma of four faces, that creator of the universe himself sprung from a lotus, showed himself on his car to Raghu's son. And Sakra and Agni and Vayu, and Yama and Varuna and the illustrious lord of the Yakshas, and the holy Rishis, and King Dasaratha also in a celestial and effulgent form and on car drawn by swans, showed themselves. And then the firmament, crowded with celestials and Gandharvas, became as beautiful as the autumnal welkin spangled with stars. And rising up from the ground, the blessed and famous Princess of Vaidha, in the midst of those present, spoke unto Rama of wide chest these words, O Prince, I impute no fault to thee, for thou art well acquainted with the behavior that one should adopt towards both men and women. But hear thou these words of mine. The ever-moving air is always present within every creature. If I have sinned, let him forsake my vital forces. If I have sinned, O then let fire and water and space and earth, like air whom I have already invoked, also forsake my vital forces. And as so hero, I have never even in my dreams, cherished the image of any other person, so be thou my lord as appointed by the gods. After Sita had spoken, a sacred voice, resounding through the whole of that region, was heard in the skies, gladdening the hearts of the high-souled monkeys. And the wind god was heard to say, O son of Raghu, what Sita hath said is true. I am the god of wind. The princess of Mithila is sinless. Therefore, O king, be united with thy wife. And the god of fire said, O son of Raghu, I dwell within the bodies of all creatures. O descendant of Kukutstha, the princess of Mithila is not guilty of even the minutest fault. And Varuna then said, O son of Raghu, the humors in every creature's body derive their existence from me. I tell thee, let the princess of Mithila be accepted by thee. And Brahma himself then said, O descendant of Kakutstha, O son, in thee that art honest and pure and conversant with the duties of royal sages, this conduct is not strange. Listen, however, to these words of mine. Thou hast, O hero, slain this enemy of the gods, the Gandharvas, the Nagas, the Yakshas, the Danavas, and the great Rishis. It was through my grace that he had hitherto been unslayable of all creatures. And, indeed, it was for some reason that I had tolerated him for some time. The wretch however abducted Sita for his own destruction. And as regards Sita, I protected her through Nalakuvara's curse. For that person had cursed Ravana of old, saying, that if he ever approached an unwilling woman, his head should certainly be split into 100 fragments. Let no suspicion therefore be thine. O thou of great glory, accept thy wife. Thou hast indeed achieved a mighty feat for the benefit of the gods, O thou that art of divine effulgence. And last of all Dasaratha said, I have been gratified with thee, O child. Blessed be thou, I am thy father Dasaratha. I command thee to take back thy wife, and rule thy kingdom, O thou foremost of men. Rama then replied, If thou art my father, I salute thee with reverence, O king of kings. I shall indeed return at thy command to the delightful city of Ayodhya. Markandeya continued, thus addressed his father, O bull of the Bharata race, gladly answered Rama, the corners of whose eyes were of a reddish hue, saying, Return to Ayodhya and rule thou that kingdom. O thou of great glory, thy 14 years of exile have been completed. Thus addressed by Dasaratha, Rama bowed to the gods, and saluted by his friends, he was united with his wife, like the lord of the celestials with the daughter of Puloman. And that chastiser of foes then gave a boon to Avindhya. And he also bestowed both riches and honors on the Rakshasa woman named Trijatha. And when Brahma with all the celestials having Indra at their head, said unto Rama, O thou that ownest Kausalya for thy mother, what boons after thy heart shall we grant thee? Rama thereupon prayed them to grant him firm adherence to virtues and invincibility in respect of all foes. And he also asked for the restoration to life of all those monkeys that had been slain by the Rakshasas, and after Brahma had said so be it, those monkeys, O king, restored to life, rose up from the field of battle, and Sita too, of great good fortune, granted unto Hanuman a boon, saying, Let thy life, O son, last as long as the fame of Rama's achievements. And, O Hanuman of yellow eyes, let celestial viands and drinks be ever available to thee through my grace. Then the celestials with Indra at their head all disappeared in the very sight of those warriors of spotless achievements. And beholding Rama united with the daughter of Janaka, the charioteer of Sakra, highly pleased, addressed him in the midst of friends, and said these words, O thou of prowess that can never be baffled, thou hast dispelled the sorrow of the celestials, the Gandharvas, the Yakshas, the Asuras, the Nagas, and human beings. As long therefore as the earth will hold together, so long will all creatures with the celestials, the Asuras, the Gandharvas, the Yakshas, the Rakshasas, and the Panagas, speak of thee. And having said these words unto Rama, Matali worshipped that son of Raghu, and having obtained the leave of that foremost of wielders of weapons, he went away on that same chariot of solar effulgence. And Rama also, with Sumitra's son and Vibhishana, and accompanied by all the monkeys with Sugriva at their head, placing Sita in the van and having made arrangements for the protection of Lanka, recrossed the ocean by the same bridge. And he rode on that beautiful and sky-ranging chariot called the Pushpayue that was capable of going everywhere at the will of the rider. And that subduer of passions was surrounded by his principal counselors in order of precedence. And arriving at that part of the seashore where he had formerly laid himself down, the virtuous king, with all the monkeys, pitched his temporary abode. And the son of Raghu then, bringing the monkeys before him in due time, worshipped them all, and gratifying them with presents of jewels and gems, dismissed them one after another. And after all the monkey chiefs and the apes with bovine tails and the bears had gone away, Rama re-entered Kishkindia with Sugriva. And accompanied by both Vibhishana and Sugriva, Rama re-entered Kishkindia riding on the Pushpaka car and showing the princess of Vaidha the woods along the way. And having arrived at Kishkindia, Rama, that foremost of all smiters, installed the successful Angada as prince regent of the kingdom. And accompanied by the same friends as also by Sumitra's son, Rama proceeded towards his city along the same path by which he had come. And having reached the city of Ayodhya, the king dispatched Hanuman thence as envoy to Bharata. And Hanuman, having ascertained Bharata's intentions from external indications, gave him the good news of Rama's arrival. And after the son of Pavana had come back, Rama entered Nandigrama. And having entered that town, Rama beheld Bharata besmeared with filth and attired in rags and seated with his elder brother's sandals placed before him. And being united, O bull of Bharata race, with both Bharata and Shatrugna, the mighty son of Raghu, along with Sumitra's son, began to rejoice exceedingly. And Bharata and Shatrugna also, united with their eldest brother, and beholding Sita, both derived great pleasure. And Bharata then, after having worshipped his returned brother, made over to him with great pleasure, the kingdom that had been in his hands as a sacred trust. And Vasishtha and Vamadeva then together installed that hero in the sovereignty of Ayodhya at the 8th Muhurta of the day under the asterism called Shravana. And after his installation was over, Rama gave leave to well-pleased Sugriva the king of the monkeys, along with all his followers, as also to rejoicing Vibhishana of Pulastya's race, to return to their respective abodes. And having worshipped them with various articles of enjoyment, and done everything that was suitable to the occasion, Rama dismissed those friends of his with a sorrowful heart. And the son of Raghu then, having worshipped that Pushpaka chariot, joyfully gave it back unto Vaisravana. And then assisted by the celestial Rishi Vasishtha, Rama performed on the banks of the Gomati 10 horse sacrifices without obstruction of any kind and with treble presents unto Brahmanas. Thus ends the 289th section in the Draupadi Harana Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 290, Draupadi Harana Parva continued. Markandeya said, "It was thus, O mighty armed one, that Rama of immeasurable energy had suffered, of old, such excessive calamity in consequence of his exile in the woods. O tiger among men, do not grieve for, O chastiser of foes, thou art Kshatriya. Thou too treadest in the path in which strength of arms is to be put forth, the path that leadeth to tangible rewards. Thou hast not even a particle of sin. Even the celestials with Indra at their head, and the Asuras have to tread in the path that is trod by thee. It was after such afflictions that the wielder of the thunderbolt, aided by the Maruts, slew Vritra, and the invincible Namuchi and the Bakshasi of long tongue. He that hath assistance, always secureth the accomplishment of all his purposes. What is that which cannot be vanquished in battle by him that hath Dhananjaya for his brother? This Bhima also, of terrible prowess, is the foremost of mighty persons. The heroic and youthful sons of Madravati again are mighty bowmen. With allies such as these, why dost thou despair, O chastiser of foes? These are capable of vanquishing the army of the wielder himself, of the thunderbolt with the Maruts in the midst. Having these mighty bowmen of celestial forms for thy allies, thou, O bull of Bharata race, art sure to conquer in battle all thy foes. Behold this Krishna, the daughter of Drupada, forcibly abducted by the wicked-minded Sendava from pride of strength and energy, hath been brought back by these mighty warriors after achieving terrible feats. Behold, King Jayadratha was vanquished and lay powerless before thee. The princess of Vaidha was rescued with almost no allies by Rama after the slaughter in battle of the 10-necked Rakshasa of terrible prowess. Indeed, the allies of Rama, in that contest, were monkeys and black-faced bears, creatures that were not even human. Think of all this, O king, in thy mind. Therefore, O foremost of gurus, grieve not for all that hath occurred, O bull of the Bharata race. Illustrious persons like thee never indulge in sorrow, O smiter of foes. Vaisambhayana continued, it was thus that the king was comforted by Markandeya. And then that high-souled one, casting off his sorrows, once more spoke unto Markandeya. Thus ends the 298th section in the Draupadi Harana Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 291, Pativrata Mahatmya Parva. Yudhishthira said, O mighty sage, I do not so much grieve for myself or these my brothers or the loss of my kingdom as I do for this daughter of Drupada. When we were afflicted at the game of the dice by those wicked-souled ones, it was Krishna that delivered us. And she was forcibly carried off from the forest by Jayadratha. Hast thou even seen or heard of any chaste and exalted lady that resembled this daughter of Drupada? Markandeya said, Listen, O king, how the exalted merit of chaste ladies, O Yudhishthira, was completely obtained by a princess named Savitri. There was a king among the Madras, who was virtuous and highly pious. And he always ministered unto the Brahmanas, and was high-souled and firm in promise. And he was of subdued senses and given to sacrifices. And he was the foremost of givers and was able and beloved by both the citizens and the rural population. And the name of that lord of earth was Aswapati. And he was intent on the welfare of all beings. And that forgiving monarch of truthful speech and subdued senses was without issue. And when he got old, he was stricken with grief at this. And with the object of raising offspring, he observed rigid vows and began to live upon frugal fare, having recourse to the brahmacharya mode of life, and restraining his senses. And that best of kings, daily offering 10,000 oblations to the fire, recited mantras in honor of Savitri and ate temperately at the 6th hour. And he passed 18 years, practicing such vows. Then when the 18 years were full, Savitri was pleased with him. And O king, issuing with great delight, in embodied form, from the Agnihotra fire, the goddess showed herself to that king. And intent on conferring boons, she spoke these words unto the monarch, I have been gratified, O king, with thy brahmacharya practices, thy purity and self-restraint and observance of vows, and all thy endeavors and veneration. Do thou, O mighty king, O Aswapati, ask for the boon that thou desirest. Thou ought, however, by no means show any disregard for virtue. Thereat Aswapati said, It is with the desire of attaining virtue that I have been engaged in this task. O goddess, may many sons be born unto me worthy of my race. If thou art pleased with me, O goddess, I ask for this boon. The twice-born ones have assured me that great merit lieth in having offspring. Savitri replied, O king, having already learnt this thy intention, I had spoken unto that lord, the grandsire, about thy sons. Through the favour granted by the self-create, there shall speedily be born unto thee on earth a daughter of great energy. It behoveth thee not to make any reply. Well pleased, I tell thee this at the command of the grandsire. Markandeya said, having accepted Savitri's words and saying, So be it, the king again gratified her and said, May this happen soon. On Savitri vanishing away, the monarch entered his own city. And that hero began to live in his kingdom, ruling his subjects righteously. And when some time had elapsed, that king, observant of vows, begat offspring on his eldest queen engaged in the practice of virtue. And then, bull of the Bharata race, the embryo in the womb of the princess of Malava increased like the lord of stars in the heavens during the lighted fortnight. And when the time came, she brought forth a daughter furnished with lotus-like eyes. And that best of monarchs, joyfully performed the usual ceremonies on her behalf. And as she had been bestowed with delight by the goddess Savitri by virtue of the oblations offered in honor of that goddess, both her father and the Brahmanas named her Savitri. And the king's daughter grew like unto Shri herself in an embodied form. And in due time, that damsel attained her puberty. And beholding that graceful maiden of slender waist and ample hips, and resembling a golden image, people thought, We have received a goddess. And overpowered by her energy, none could wed that girl of eyes like lotus leaves, and possessed of a burning splendor. And it came to pass that once on the occasion of a Parva, having fasted and bathed her head, she presented herself before the family deity and caused the Brahmanas to offer oblations with due rites to the sacrificial fire. And taking the flowers that had been offered to the god, that lady, beautiful as Shri herself, went to her high-souled sire. And having reverenced the feet of her father and offering him the flowers she had brought, that maiden of exceeding grace, with joined hands, stood at the side of the king. And seeing his own daughter resembling a celestial damsel arrived at puberty, and unsought by people, the king became sad. And the king said, "Daughter, the time for bestowing thee is come. Yet none asketh thee. Do thou therefore thyself seek for a husband equal to thee in qualities. That person who may be desired by thee should be notified to me. Do thou choose for thy husband as thou listest. I shall bestow thee with deliberation. Do thou, auspicious one, listen to me as I tell thee the words which I heard recited by the twice-born ones. The father that doth not bestow his daughter cometh by disgrace. And the husband that knoweth not his wife in her season meeteth with disgrace. And the son that doth not protect his mother when her husband is dead, also suffereth disgrace. Hearing these words of mine, do thou engage thyself in search of a husband. Do thou act in such a way that we may not be censured by the gods." Markandeya said, having said these words to his daughter and his old counselors, he instructed the attendants to follow her, saying, "Go." Thereat, bashfully bowing down unto her father's feet, the meek maid went out without hesitation, in compliance with the words of her sire. And ascending a golden car, she went to the delightful asylum of the royal sages, accompanied by her father's aged counselors. There, son, worshipping the feet of the aged ones, she gradually began to roam over all the woods. Thus the king's daughter, distributing wealth in all sacred regions, ranged the various places belonging to the foremost of the twice-born ones. Thus ends the 291st section in the Pativrata Mahatmya Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 292, Pativrata Mahatmya Parva continued. Markandeya continued, on one occasion, Bharata, when that king, the lord of the Madras, was seated with Narada in the midst of his court, engaged in conversation, Savitri, accompanied by the king's counselors, came to her father's abode after having visited various sacred regions and asylums. And beholding her father seated with Narada, she worshipped the feet of both by bending down her head. And Narada then said, "Whither had this thy daughter gone? And king, whence also doth she come? Why also dost thou not bestow her on a husband now that she hath arrived at the age of puberty?" Aswapati answered, saying, "Surely it was on this very business that she had been sent, and she returneth now from her search. Do thou, O celestial sage, listen even from her as to the husband she hath chosen herself." Markandeya continued, then the blessed maid, commanded by her father with the words, "Relate everything in detail," regarded those words of her sire as if they were those of a god, and spoke unto him thus: "There was amongst the Salvas, a virtuous Kshatriya king known by the name of Dhumatsana. And it came to pass that in course of time he became blind. And that blind king, possessed of wisdom, had an only son. And it so happened that an old enemy dwelling in the vicinity, taking advantage of the king's mishap, deprived him of his kingdom. And thereupon the monarch, accompanied by his wife bearing a child on her breast, went into the woods. And having retired into the forests, he adopted great vows and began to practice ascetic austerities. And his son, born in the city, began to grow in the hermitage. That youth, fit to be my husband, I have accepted in my heart for my lord." At these words of hers, Narada said, "Alas king, Savitri hath committed a great wrong, since, not knowing, she hath accepted for her lord this Satyavan of excellent qualities. His father speaketh the truth, and his mother also is truthful in her speech. And it is for this that the Brahmanas have named the son Satyavan. In his childhood he took great delight in horses, and used to make horses of clay. And he used also to draw pictures of horses. And for this that youth is sometimes called by the name of Chitraswa. The king then asked, and is Prince Satyavan, who is devoted to his father, endued with energy and intelligence and forgiveness and courage? Narada replied, saying, in energy Satyavan is like unto the sun, and in wisdom like unto Vrihaspati. And he is brave like Ptho the lord of the celestials, and forgiving like unto the earth herself. Aswapati then said, and is the Prince Satyavan liberal in gifts and devoted to the Brahmanas? Is he handsome and magnanimous and lovely to behold? Narada said, in bestowal of gifts according to his power, the mighty son of Dhumatsana is like unto Sanskrit his son Rantideva. In truthfulness of speech and devotion unto Brahmanas, he is like Sivi, the son of Usinara. And he is magnanimous like Yayati, and beautiful like the moon. And in beauty of person he is like either of the twin Aswins. And with senses under control, he is meek, and brave, and truthful. And with passion in subjection he is devoted to his friends, and free from malice and modest and patient. Indeed, briefly speaking, they that are possessed of great ascetic merit and are of exalted character say that he is always correct in his conduct, and that honor is firmly seated on his brow. Hearing this, Aswapati said, O reverend sage, thou tellest me that he is possessed of every virtue. Do thou now tell me his defects, if indeed he hath any. Narada then said, I hath one only defect, that hath overwhelmed all his virtues. That defect is incapable of being conquered by even the greatest efforts. He hath only one defect, and no other. Within a year from this day, Satyavan endued with a short life will cast off his body. Hearing these words of the sage, the king said, Come, O Savitri, go thou and choose another for thy lord, O beautiful damsel. That one great defect, in this youth, existeth, covering all his merits. The illustrious Narada, honored by even the gods, saith, that Satyavan will have to cast off his body within a year, his days being numbered. At these words of her father, Savitri said, the death can fall but once, a daughter can be given away but once, and once only can a person say, I give away. These three things can take place only once. Indeed, with a life short or long, possessed of virtues or bereft of them, I have, for once, selected my husband. Twice I shall not select. Having first settled a thing mentally, it is expressed in words, and then it is carried out into practice. Of this my mind is an example. Narada then said, O best of men, the heart of thy daughter Savitri wavereth not. It is not possible by any means to make her swerve from this path of virtue. In no other person are those virtues that dwell in Satyavan. The bestowal of thy daughter, therefore, is approved by me. The king said, What thou hast said, O illustrious one, should never be disobeyed, for thy words are true. And I shall act as thou hast said, since thou art my preceptor. Narada said, May the bestowal of thy daughter Savitri be attended with peace. I shall now depart. Blessed be all of ye. Markandeya continued, having said this, Narada rose up into the sky and went to heaven. On the other hand, the king began to make preparations for his daughter's wedding. Thus ends the 292nd section in the Pativrata Mahatmya Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 293, Pativrata Mahatmya Parva continued. Markandeya said, having pondered over these words of Narada about his daughter's marriage, the king began to make arrangements about the nuptials. And summoning all the old Brahmanas, and Ritvajas together with the priests, he set out with his daughter on an auspicious day. And arriving at the asylum of Dumatsana in the sacred forest, the king approached the royal sage on foot, accompanied by the twice-born ones. And there he beheld the blind monarch of great wisdom seated on a cushion of kusa grass spread under sala tree. And after duly reverencing the royal sage, the king in an humble speech introduced himself. Thereupon, offering him the aglia, a seat, and a cow, the monarch asked his royal guest, "Wherefore is this visit?" Thus addressed, the king disclosed everything about his intentions and purpose with reference to Satyavan. And Aswapati said, "O royal sage, this beautiful girl is my daughter named Savitri. Thou versed in morality, do thou, agreeably to the customs of our order, take her from me as thy daughter-in-law." Hearing these words, Dumatsana said, "Deprived of kingdom, and taking up our abode in the woods, we are engaged in the practice of virtue as ascetics with regulated lives. Unworthy of a forest life, how will thy daughter, living in the sylvan asylum, bear this hardship?" Aswapati said, "When my daughter knoweth, as well as myself, that happiness and misery come and go without either being stationary, such words as these are not fit to be used towards one like me, king. I have come hither having made up my mind. I have bowed to thee from friendship, it behoveth thee not therefore to destroy my hope. It behoveth thee not also to disregard me who, moved by love, have come to thee. Thou art my equal and fit for an alliance with me, as indeed, I am thy equal and fit for alliance with thee. Do thou therefore accept my daughter for thy daughter-in-law and the wife of the good Satyavan." Hearing these words, Dumatsana said, "Formerly I had desired an alliance with thee. But I hesitated, being subsequently deprived of my kingdom. Let this wish therefore that I had formerly entertained be accomplished this very day. Thou art indeed a welcome guest to me." Then summoning all the twice-born ones residing in the hermitages of that forest, the two kings caused the union to take place with due rites. And having bestowed his daughter with suitable robes and ornaments, Aswapati went back to his abode in great joy. And Satyavan, having obtained a wife possessed of every accomplishment, became highly glad, while she also rejoiced exceedingly upon having gained the husband after her own heart. And when her father had departed, she put off all her ornaments, and clad herself in barks and cloths dyed in red. And by her services and virtues, her tenderness and self-denial, and by her agreeable offices unto all, she pleased everybody. And she gratified her mother-in-law by attending to her person and by covering her with robes and ornaments. And she gratified her father-in-law by worshipping him as a god and controlling her speech. And she pleased her husband by her honeyed speeches, her skill in every kind of work, the evenness of her temper, and by the indications of her love in private. And thus, Bharata, living in the asylum of those pious dwellers of the forest, they continued for some time to practice ascetic austerities. But the words spoken by Narada were present night and day in the mind of the sorrowful Savitri. Thus ends the 293rd section in the Pativrata Mahatmya Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 294, Pativrata Mahatmya Parva continued. Markandeya said, "At length, king, after a long time had passed away, the hour that had been appointed for the death of Satyavan arrived. And as the words that had been spoken by Narada were ever present in the mind of Savitri, she had counted the days as they passed. And having ascertained that her husband would die on the 4th day following, the damsel fasted day and night, observing the Triratra vow. And hearing of her vow, the king became exceedingly sorrowful and rising up, soothed Savitri and said these words, "This vow that thou hast begun to observe, daughter of a king, is exceedingly hard, for it is extremely difficult to fast for 3 nights together." And hearing those words, Savitri said, "Thou needst not be sorry, O father. This vow I shall be able to observe. I have for certain undertaken this task with perseverance, and perseverance is the cause of the successful observance of vows. And having listened to her, Dyumatsana said, I can by no means say unto thee, do thou break thy vow. One like me should on the contrary say, do thou complete thy vow. And having said this to her, the high-minded Dyumatsana stopped. And Savitri, continuing to fast, began to look lean like a wooden doll. And, O bull of the Bharata race, thinking that her husband would die on the morrow, the woe-stricken Savitri, observing a fast, spent that night in extreme anguish. And when the sun had risen about a couple of hands, Savitri, thinking within herself 2 days that day, finished her morning rites, and offered oblations to the flaming fire. And bowing down unto the aged Brahmanas, and her father-in-law, and mother-in-law, she stood before them with joined hands, concentrating her senses, and for the welfare of Savitri, all the ascetics dwelling in that hermitage, uttered the auspicious benediction that she should never suffer widowhood. And Savitri, immersed in contemplation, accepted those words of the ascetics, mentally saying, so be it. And the king's daughter, reflecting on those words of Narada, remained, expecting the hour and the moment. Then, O best of the Bharatas, well pleased, her father-in-law and mother-in-law said these words unto the princess seated in a corner, thou hast completed the vow as prescribed. The time for thy meal hath now arrived, therefore, do thou what is proper. Thereat Savitri said, now that I have completed the purposed vow, I will eat when the sun goes down. Even this is my heart's resolve, and this my vow. Markandeya continued, and when Savitri had spoken thus about her meal, Satyavan, taking his axe upon his shoulders, set out for the woods. And at this, Savitri said unto her husband, it behoveth thee not to go alone. I will accompany thee. I cannot bear to be separated from thee. Hearing these words of hers, Satyavan said, thou hast never before repaired to the forest. And, O lady, the forest paths are hard to pass. Besides, thou hast been reduced by fast on account of thy vow. How wouldst thou therefore be able to walk on foot? Thus addressed, Savitri said, I do not feel languor because of the fast, nor do I feel exhaustion. And I have made up my mind to go. It behoveth thee not therefore to prevent me. At this, Satyavan said, if thou desirest to go, I will gratify that desire of thine. Do thou however take the permission of my parents, so that I may be guilty of no fault. Markandeya continued, thus addressed by her lord, Savitri of high voice saluted her father-in-law and mother-in-law and addressed them, saying, this my husband goeth to the forest for procuring fruits. Permitted by my revered lady mother and father-in-law, I will accompany him. For today I cannot bear to be separated from him. Thy son goeth out for the sake of the sacrificial fire and for his reverend superiors. He ought not, therefore, to be dissuaded. Indeed, he could be dissuaded if he went into the forest on any other errand. Do ye not prevent me. I will go into the forest with him. It is a little less than a year that I have not gone out of the asylum. Indeed, I am extremely desirous of beholding the blossoming woods. Hearing these words, Dyumatsana said, since Savitri hath been bestowed by her father as my daughter-in-law, I do not remember that she hath ever spoken any words couching a request. Let my daughter-in-law, therefore, have her will in this matter. Do thou, however, O daughter, act in such a way that Satyavan's work may not be neglected. Markandeya continued, having received the permission of both, the illustrious Savitri departed with her lord, in seeming smiles although her heart was racked with grief. And that lady of large eyes went on, beholding picturesque and delightful woods inhabited by swarms of peacocks. And Satyavan sweetly said unto Savitri, Behold these rivers of sacred currents and these excellent trees decked with flowers. But the faultless Savitri continued to watch her lord in all his moods, and recollecting the words of the celestial sage, she considered her husband as already dead. And with heart cleft in twain, that damsel, replying to her lord, softly followed him expecting that hour. Thus ends the 294th section in the Pativrata Mahatmya Parva of the Vana Parva. If you enjoyed this audiobook, please like and subscribe to be notified of when new audiobooks are uploaded. Thank you for listening and learning. Shanti.